Chapter 1. The Yuletide Invitation. The wind howled down Baker Street like a banshee denied its due, rattling the window panes of 56B with a ferocity that would have unsettled lesser men. Hercule Poirot, however, was not lesser. He sat in his favourite armchair, legs crossed with precision, a cup of thick dark chocolate balanced delicately in one hand. The fire crackled in the grate, casting golden flickers across the room's immaculate order. Every book aligned, every ornament dusted, every cushion plumped to geometric perfection. Outside, London lay buried beneath a thin, reluctant dusting of snow, hardly the picturesque blanket of the Christmas cards, but sufficient to remind the city that winter had arrived with its usual ill humour. Poirot sipped his chocolate, eyes half closed in contentment. Christmas, to him, was a season of sentimentality best observed from a safe distance. He had no family to oblige him, no children to demand his presence beneath a gaudy tree. His festivities were intellectual, a well-chosen novel, perhaps a new monograph on the psychology of the criminal mind, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that somewhere a puzzle awaited his little grey cells. This year, he had resolved, would be one of perfect solitude. The doorbell shattered that illusion with a single imperious ring. Poirot's moustache twitched in mild irritation. He set the cup upon its saucer with a click that spoke volumes. George, his valet, appeared with the silent efficiency of a well-oiled machine. "A telegram, sir," George murmured, extending a silver tray. "Marked urgent." Poirot raised an eyebrow. Urgent telegrams were rarely bearers of glad tidings, yet they possessed a certain allure. He slit the envelope with a letter opener shaped like a miniature sword, a gift from a grateful duchess, and unfolded the crisp yellow paper. The message was brief, yet it carried the weight of a thunderclap. Monsieur Poirot, stop Willowbrook Manor, Oxfordshire, stop. Christmas Eve, gathering, stop your presence requested, stop a matter of delicacy, stop details, upon arrival, stop. Lady Evelyn Hawthorne Poirot read it twice, then a third time for good measure. Lady Evelyn Hawthorne. The name stirred memories like sediment in a shaken wineglass. He had encountered her once, years ago, at a charity gala in Brussels. She had been younger then. A vision in emerald silk, with laughter that concealed a mind sharp as cut glass. Her husband, Sir Reginald, had died under circumstances that polite society preferred not to discuss. A hunting accident, they said, though the whispers spoke of debts, duels, and a certain indiscretion with a countess. Lady Evelyn had retreated to the country, emerging only rarely, like a rare orchid that bloomed in moonlight. And now she summoned Hercule Poirot to her manor for Christmas. "George," Poirot said, folding the telegram with care, "it appears I am to be deprived of my solitude." "Very good, sir," George replied, betraying neither surprise nor disappointment. "Shall I prepare the travelling case?" "Oui. The grey wool suit, the fur-lined coat, and the new muffler, the burgundy one, I think. One must be prepared for the English countryside." Poirot rose, smoothing an invisible crease from his trousers. "Also, the small leather notebook, and the fountain pen with the green ink. One never knows when inspiration may strike." As George vanished to attend to these directives, Poirot crossed to the window. The snow had begun to fall in earnest now, fat flakes drifting past the gas lamps like confetti at a funeral. Willowbrook Manor. He had never visited, but he knew of it by reputation. A sprawling Elizabethan pile, half-timbered and ivy-clad, surrounded by ancient yews, and a moat that had long since surrendered to duckweed. It was said to be beautiful in summer, haunted in winter. Perfect then for a Christmas gathering. Poirot's reflection stared back at him from the glass. The neat, oval face, the magnificent moustache waxed to twin points of perfection, the eyes that missed nothing. He permitted himself a small smile. A matter of delicacy, the telegram had said. In Poirot's experience, delicacy was merely a euphemism for disaster, wearing its Sunday best. The telephone rang, shrill and demanding. Poirot lifted the receiver with the wariness of a man handling a live eel. "Allô, Monsieur Poirot?" The voice was female, cultured, with a faint tremor of urgency. "This is Miss Felicity Frost, Lady Evelyn's secretary. I trust you received the telegram." "Indeed, mademoiselle. It arrived not 5 minutes ago, with all the subtlety of a gunshot in a library." A nervous laugh. "Yes, well, her ladyship was most insistent that you come at once. The train from Paddington departs at 11:30 tomorrow morning. A car will meet you at Oxford Station. The weather is turning foul, but the manor is well stocked, and the fires are lit." "Tell me, Miss Frost," Poirot interrupted gently, "why does Lady Evelyn require the services of Hercule Poirot at Christmas? Is it a theft, a forgery, or perhaps—" his voice dropped to a conspiratorial murmur, "a murder?" A pause so long that Poirot wondered if the line had gone dead. "Nothing so dramatic," Miss Frost said at last, though her tone suggested otherwise. "It's a family matter, an heirloom, the hawthorn wreath, to be precise. It's been in the family for centuries, and there have been irregularities." "Irregularities," Poirot repeated, savouring the word. "How delightfully vague. And this wreath, it is valuable? Priceless, in the right circles. Emeralds, rubies, a central diamond said to have belonged to Catherine of Aragon. But its sentimental value outweighs the monetary. Lady Evelyn is hosting a gathering of the family, her nephews, her niece, a few close friends. She wishes everything to be perfect. Your presence, monsieur, Poirot, would lend gravitas." Poirot considered. Gravitas was a commodity he possessed in abundance, yet he was not in the habit of lending it lightly. "Very well," he said, "I shall come. But inform Lady Evelyn that Hercule Poirot does not solve puzzles for the amusement of others. If there is a mystery, it will be unravelled. If there is a crime, it will be exposed. And if there is merely a family squabble over baubles," he allowed himself a delicate shudder, "then I shall depart with the first available sleigh." Miss Frost's relief was palpable. "Thank you, monsieur. You cannot imagine what this means. Oh, and one more thing. The wreath is to be the centrepiece of the Christmas Eve banquet. It will be unveiled at midnight, beneath the mistletoe. Lady Evelyn insists that nothing must go wrong." After she rang off, Poirot stood for a long moment, staring at the telephone as though it might sprout wings and fly away. The hawthorn wreath. A midnight unveiling. A house full of relatives, with no doubt centuries of grudges simmering like mulled wine, and snow thick enough to bury a regiment. He turned to the fireplace, where the flames danced with mischievous glee. "Mon Dieu," he murmured to the empty room. "It seems that Hercule Poirot is to play Father Christmas after all. But instead of gifts I bring justice, and instead of reindeer—" He glanced at the window, where the snow now fell in earnest. "I have only the little grey cells." George reappeared, the travelling case packed with military precision. "Will there be anything else, sir?" Poirot considered. "Yes. Pack the small revolver, the one with the mother-of-pearl handle. One does not anticipate violence at a Christmas house party, but the English aristocracy has a way of surprising even Hercule Poirot." As Georges departed, Poirot returned to his armchair. The chocolate had cooled, but he drank it anyway. savouring the bitterness beneath the sweetness. Tomorrow he would leave the ordered sanctuary of Baker Street for the chaos of Willowbrook Manor. He would trade silence for the clamour of family, solitude for the scrutiny of strangers. And somewhere, in the heart of that ancient house, a wreath waited, glittering with jewels, heavy with history, and, if Poirot's instincts were correct, harbouring a secret dark enough to cast a shadow over the merriest of seasons. Outside, the snow continued to fall, soft and relentless, erasing the footprints of the city beneath a blanket of white. Poirot watched it for a long time, his mind already turning over possibilities like a magician shuffling cards. The game, as they say, was afoot, and Hercule Poirot, with his moustache bristling in anticipation, was ready to play. Chapter 2. Arrival amid the snowflakes. The train from Paddington was a beast of iron and steam, exhaling great clouds of white into the grey morning as it thundered westward. Hercule Poirot occupied a first-class compartment, alone, his travelling rug tucked neatly about his knees, a copy of Le Monde folded to the crossword upon the small table. Outside, the landscape slid past in a blur of frost-laced fields and skeletal hedgerows. The snow now falling in earnest, each flake a tiny assassin sent to bury the world. Poirot disliked trains on principle. They were noisy, dirty, and filled with people who insisted on sharing their life stories with strangers. But he tolerated this one with the stoicism of a man who had once crossed the Sahara on a camel with dysentery. The rhythm of the wheels soothed him. A mechanical heartbeat beneath the murmur of conversation from the corridor. He had solved 3 clues of the crossword, élégance, mystère, cacao, when the door slid open with a rasp. "Tickets, please." The conductor was a tall man with a moustache that aspired to Poirot's, but fell tragically short. Poirot handed over his ticket without looking up. "Oxford, sir?" the conductor asked, clipping the paper with a hole punch that sounded like a guillotine. "Indeed, and then one hopes, a motor car. The English countryside is charming, but not when one is forced to walk it in galoshes." The conductor chuckled, a sound like gravel in a bucket. "You'll be met, sir. Lady Hawthorne's man is never late. Mind the step when you disembark. The platform's slippery as an eel in butter." He moved on, and Poirot returned to his crossword. But his concentration was broken. The mention of Lady Hawthorne's man had stirred a memory. She had spoken of a secretary, Miss Frost, but not of a chauffeur. In Poirot's experience, the staff of great houses were as revealing as their masters. A punctual driver suggested efficiency, a tardy one, chaos. He made a mental note to observe this individual closely. The train slowed, brakes squealing like a dying swan. Oxford Station emerged from the snow like a Gothic cathedral, all spires and gargoyles shrouded in white. Poirot gathered his belongings, case, umbrella, the small revolver nestled in its velvet pouch, and stepped onto the platform. The cold hit him like a slap from an indignant duchess. His breath plumed before him, and his moustache, despite liberal applications of wax, began to droop in protest. A man detached himself from the shadows of the booking hall. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a chauffeur's livery of dark green with silver buttons that gleamed like frost. His face was weathered, with a nose that had been broken at least once, and eyes the colour of winter steel. "Monsieur Poirot." His voice was gravel wrapped in velvet. "Name's Briggs. Lady Hawthorne sent me to fetch you. Car's this way." Poirot inclined his head. "Enchanté, Monsieur Briggs. You are punctual. This is gratifying." Briggs took the case without asking, his gloved hands steady. "Snow's coming down hard, sir. Roads'll be treacherous. Best we make haste." The motor car was a Rolls-Royce Phantom, its black paint glistening like a seal's hide. Briggs held the door, and Poirot slid into the back seat, sinking into leather that smelled of beeswax and old money. The engine purred to life, and they glided from the station, tyres crunching over fresh snow. The journey to Willowbrook Manor took an hour, though it felt longer. The snow fell in sheets now, obscuring the world beyond the windscreen. Briggs drove with the calm of a man who had navigated worse. His hands were steady on the wheel, his eyes flicking to the rearview mirror every few minutes. Poirot watched him with interest. "You have been with Lady Hawthorne long, Briggs?" 10 years come spring, sir." "And the manor, it is isolated?" "Like a ship in a bottle, sir. Nearest village is 5 miles, and the road's a devil in winter. But the house is warm and the cellars are deep." He paused. "You'll find the families already gathered. A lively bunch, if you'll pardon my saying." Poirot's lips twitched. "Lively is a word with many meanings, Briggs. Tell me, this wreath, the Hawthorne wreath, you have seen it?" Briggs's eyes met his in the mirror, unreadable. "Once or twice. It's kept in the safe when not on display. Beautiful thing, but it gives me the creeps. All those jewels staring out like eyes." "Eyes that see much, perhaps," Poirot murmured. "And the family, who competes for its favour?" Briggs hesitated. "There's Master Julian, Lady Evelyn's nephew. He's the heir, or thinks he is. Then Miss Clarissa, his sister, sharp as a tack, that one. And Mr. Felix Lang, the cousin from America, flashy sort. The rest are friends of the family, artists, writers, that sort. Oh, and Captain Hargreaves, he's got a limp from the war and a temper to match." Poirot filed these names away like cards in a Rolodex. "And Miss Frost, the secretary?" "Keeps to herself mostly. Efficient, though. Runs the house like clockwork." The car crested a hill, and Willowbrook Manor appeared below them. A vision from a fairy tale gone slightly awry. The house was vast, all gables and chimneys, its windows glowing amber against the white. A moat encircled it, frozen now, with ducks huddled like conspirators on the ice. Smoke curled from a dozen chimneys. And even from this distance, Poirot could see figures moving behind the mullioned windows. Briggs manoeuvred the car down a winding drive flanked by yew trees, their branches heavy with snow. As they approached, the front doors opened and a figure emerged. A woman in a fur coat, her blonde hair pinned beneath a scarlet beret. She waved, and Poirot recognized Miss Felicity Frost from their telephone conversation. The car stopped, and Briggs leapt out to open the door. Poirot stepped into the snow, his boots sinking ankle-deep. Miss Frost hurried forward, her cheeks pink with cold. "Monsieur Poirot, you made it? The roads are dreadful, but Briggs is a marvel. Come, inside, Lady Evelyn is waiting." Poirot allowed himself to be ushered through the great oak doors into a hall that smelled of pine and beeswax. A fire roared in a hearth large enough to roast an ox, and above it hung a tapestry depicting a hunt, stag, hounds, and a lady in green who bore a striking resemblance to Lady Evelyn. Servants bustled about, carrying trays of mulled wine and platters of mince pies. Somewhere, a gramophone played "God Rest You Merry Gentlemen" with a scratchy charm. Lady Evelyn herself descended the grand staircase like a queen granting an audience. She was older than Poirot remembered, but no less striking. Silver hair coiled in an elegant chignon, eyes the colour of storm clouds, and a gown of deep crimson that shimmered like spilled wine. "Hercule!" she exclaimed, extending both hands. "You came! I knew you would!" Poirot bowed over her fingers with gallant precision. "Madame, when Lady Evelyn Hawthorne commands, even the snow obeys." She laughed, a sound like champagne bubbles. "Flatterer! Come, let me introduce you. The others are in the drawing-room, arguing over charades. Briggs, take Monsieur Poirot's case to the blue room. And Miss Frost, see that the fires are stoked. We mustn't let our Belgian genius freeze." As they moved through the hall, Poirot's eyes darted everywhere. The decorations were lavish. Garlands of holly and ivy draped the banisters. Candles flickered in sconces. And in the centre of the entrance hall stood a Christmas tree that reached the ceiling, adorned with glass baubles and a star that caught the light like a diamond. But his attention was drawn to a pedestal near the foot of the stairs, empty save for a velvet cloth and a brass plaque that read, "The Hawthorne Wreath, unveiled Christmas Eve." "Soon," Lady Evelyn said, following his gaze. "Midnight tomorrow. A tradition. My grandfather started it, and we've kept it ever since. The wreath is special." "Special," Poirot echoed. "A word that covers a multitude of sins, madame." She smiled, but there was a tightness to it. "You'll see. Now come. The others are dying to meet the famous Hercule Poirot." They entered the drawing-room, a cavernous space with tapestries, velvet sofas, and a fireplace that could have accommodated a small orchestra. A dozen people turned to stare, their conversations dying like candles in a draught. Poirot felt their eyes upon him. Curious, wary, amused. Lady Evelyn clapped her hands. "Everyone, this is Monsieur Hercule Poirot. He has graciously agreed to spend Christmas with us. Poirot, may I present?" She rattled off names like a society columnist. Julian Hawthorne, tall and blonde with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Clarissa Hawthorne, petite and dark, her gaze sharp as a stiletto. Felix Lang, the American, all teeth and expensive cologne. Captain Hargreaves, leaning on a cane, his face a map of old battles. And others are artists, a poet with a monocle, a dowager dripping in pearls. Poirot bowed to each in turn, his mind cataloguing details, the way Julian's hand trembled slightly as he shook Poirot's, the faint scent of brandy on Captain Hargreaves's breath, the way Clarissa's eyes flicked to the empty pedestal in the hall. "Delighted," Poirot murmured. "A most charming assembly. One feels almost overdressed for the occasion." Laughter rippled, but it was brittle. Outside, the snow continued to fall, sealing them in. Poirot accepted a glass of mulled wine from a footman and sipped it, the spices sharp on his tongue. Julian approached, his smile now firmly in place. "Monsieur Poirot, Aunt Evelyn says you're here to ensure the wreath's safety?" Poirot tilted his head. "I am here, monsieur, because I was invited. The wreath, it is merely a detail, though I confess I am curious. A jewel said to have belonged to Catherine of Aragon. Such a thing carries history in its facets." Julian's smile faltered. "History, yes, and baggage. The family's been fighting over it for generations. But this year, Aunt Evelyn wants peace, a proper Christmas." "Peace," Poirot said softly, "is a rare commodity in families, no? Especially when inheritance is involved." Clarissa joined them, her voice cool. "You'll find we're a civilized lot, monsieur. No poison in the pudding, yet." Poirot chuckled, but his eyes were on the window, where the snow had begun to drift against the panes. Somewhere in this house, a wreath waited, glittering with secrets. And somewhere among these smiling faces, a shadow lurked. As the gramophone struck up, in the bleak midwinter, Poirot raised his glass in a silent toast. To truth to justice, and to the little grey cells that would inevitably prevail. The game had begun. Chapter 3. The Grand Christmas Eve Feast. The dining hall of Willowbrook Manor was a cathedral of oak and candlelight, its vaulted ceiling lost in shadow, its walls hung with portraits whose eyes followed every flicker of flame. A single long table stretched the length of the room, set for 14 with silver that gleamed like moonlight on frost and crystal, that chimed softly when brushed by a careless sleeve. At the centre, beneath a chandelier dripping with holly and ivy, stood the empty pedestal, velvet draped, waiting. Tomorrow at midnight, the hawthorn wreath would rest there. Tonight, it remained locked in the safe behind a tapestry of St. George slaying a dragon that looked suspiciously like a disappointed accountant. Hercule Poirot entered precisely at 8, his potent leather shoes reflecting the firelight, his bow tie a masterpiece of symmetry. He paused on the threshold, surveying the tableau with the satisfaction of a conductor about to raise his baton. The guests were already seated, a tableau vivant of anticipation and barely concealed nerves. Lady Evelyn presided at the head, regal in midnight blue velvet. A single diamond brooch, at her throat winking like a conspirator. To her right sat Julian Hawthorne, blonde hair slicked back, fingers drumming a silent tattoo on the damask cloth. To her left, Clarissa Hawthorne toyed with a pearl earring, her dark eyes unreadable. Felix Lang, the American cousin, lounged opposite Poirot, his dinner jacket a fraction too flashy, his grin a fraction too wide. Captain Hargreaves glowered from the foot, cane propped against his chair like a silent threat. The remaining seats were filled by the assorted satellites. Miss Felicity Frost, pale and efficient, Mr. Peregrine Quill, the poet with the monocle, Mrs. Arabella Finch, dowager and gossip, and a trio of artists whose names Poirot had already forgotten, but whose eccentricities he had catalogued. Mr. Dashiell Crane, who painted only in shades of bruise, Miss Lavinia Wren, sculptress of miniature gargoyles, and Dr. Mortimer Black, a psychiatrist who collected phrenology busts and sinister smiles. "Monsieur Poirot," Lady Evelyn called, her voice cutting through the murmur like a silver bell. "You are placed beside me. I insist upon the pleasure of your conversation." Poirot bowed, a gesture both courtly and calculated, and took his seat. The chair was carved with acanthus leaves that dug into his spine, a reminder that even luxury could be punitive. A footman materialized to unfold his napkin with a flourish. Another poured wine the colour of garnets. The first course arrived, a consommé so clear it might have been distilled from moonlight, garnished with a single sprig of parsley that trembled like a guilty conscience. Conversation began in fits and starts, the way a reluctant engine coughs before it roars. Mrs. Finch launched into a monologue about the declining standards of London milliners. Mr. Quill countered with a sonnet about snowflakes that rhymed ethereal with funereal. Felix Lang boasted of prohibition-defying speakeasies in Manhattan. Captain Hargreaves grunted occasionally, a sound that might have been agreement or indigestion. Poirot sipped his soup, listening. Beneath the chatter he detected currents, the way Julian's eyes flicked to the pedestal whenever the word wreath was mentioned, the way Clarissa's fingers tightened around her spoon when Felix laughed too loudly, the way Miss Frost's gaze darted to Lady Evelyn every 30 seconds, as if awaiting a signal. "Tell me, Lady Evelyn," Poirot said during a lull, his voice pitched to carry, "this tradition of the wreath, how did it begin?" All heads turned. Lady Evelyn set down her spoon with deliberate care. "My great-grandfather, Sir Bertram Hawthorne, acquired it in 1843, she said. He was in Spain, ostensibly on a grand tour, though the family suspected less reputable motives. The wreath was said to have adorned the bridal crown of Catherine of Aragon, before her marriage to Prince Arthur. Sir Bertram won it in a card game from a bankrupt duke, or so the story goes. She brought it home, had it reset with additional gems, and decreed that it should be displayed every Christmas Eve as a reminder of fortune's fickleness." "Fickleness," Poirot repeated. "A quality much in evidence at card tables, no?" Felix Lang laughed. "Sounds like my kind of guy. Though I'd have sold it and bought a yacht." Julian's jaw tightened. "Some things are worth more than money, cousin." "Name one," Felix shot back, raising his glass. Clarissa leaned forward, her voice silk over steel. "Legacy, perhaps. Or the satisfaction of knowing your descendants will squabble over your corpse as enthusiastically as you squabbled over theirs." A ripple of nervous laughter. Captain Hargreaves slammed his palm on the table, rattling the crystal. "Enough! This is Christmas, not a blasted wake." Lady Evelyn lifted a hand, and silence fell like a guillotine. "Peace, Captain. We are all friends here, or at least," her smile was sharp, "we pretend to be." The second course arrived. Roast goose with chestnut stuffing, flanked by pyramids of glazed carrots and Brussels sprouts that gleamed like emeralds. The footman moved with choreographed grace, refilling glasses, whisking away plates. Poirot noted the hierarchy. Briggs, the chauffeur, stood at the door, arms folded, his presence a silent reminder that the outside world was locked out by snow and circumstance. As the goose was carved, Lady Evelyn wielding the knife with the precision of a surgeon, Mr. Quill launched into a recitation of The Night Before Christmas, substituting Willowbrook for the house and Wreath for stockings. The artists clapped politely. Dr. Black murmured something about sublimated aggression. Miss Wren produced a tiny gargoyle from her reticule and set it beside her plate, where it leered at the goose. Poirot turned to Miss Frost, who sat to his left, her plate barely touched. "You are not hungry, mademoiselle," she started, as if waking from a trance. Forgive me, the preparations have been taxing." "Taxing," Poirot echoed. "A word that covers everything from misplaced napkins to misplaced motives. Tell me, the wreath, it is insured?" Her eyes widened. "Of course, for a fortune. But Lady Evelyn would never—" She stopped, biting her lip. "Never what?" "Never part with it, not willingly." Poirot filed this away. Willingness was a slippery concept in families where love and loathing shared the same cradle. The main course gave way to dessert. A Christmas pudding flambéed with such enthusiasm that the flames leapt higher than the chandelier. Mr. Crane applauded as if at the theatre. Mrs. Finch shrieked theatrically. The pudding was served with brandy butter and a silver charm for each guest. Poirot received a tiny anchor, which he pocketed with a murmur about stability. Coffee followed, strong and black, served in cups so delicate they seemed spun from spider silk. A Sueur gramophone in the corner had been silenced. In its place, a string quartet, summoned from Oxford despite the weather, played a wistful rendition of Greensleeves. The mood softened, edges blurred by wine and warmth. Lady Evelyn rose, glass in hand. "To absent friends," she said simply, "and to the wreath, which binds us, whether we wish it or not." Glasses clinked. Poirot raised his butt, did not drink. His eyes were on the pedestal, where a single candle had been placed, its flame trembling as if in fear. Julian stood next. "To Aunt Evelyn, who keeps the family together with sheer willpower and better wine than we deserve." Laughter, genuine this time. Clarissa remained seated, her smile thin. Felix toasted to new worlds and old grudges. Captain Hargreaves muttered something about damned nonsense and drained his glass in one gulp. As the quartet struck up, "O come, all you faithful," the party began to break apart. Some drifted to the drawing-room for brandy and cards. Others lingered, drawn to the fire like moths. Poirot excused himself, citing the need to consult his digestion, and slipped into the hall. The pedestal stood alone, the candle guttering. He approached, noting the faint outline of a safe behind the tapestry, modern, with a combination lock. Child's play for a determined thief, but not for an amateur. He ran a gloved finger along the velvet cloth. A single strand of holly berry lay there, crushed, its juice staining the fabric like blood. "Curious," he murmured. Footsteps behind him. He turned to find Clarissa Hawthorne, a cigarette in a long ebony holder, smoke curling like a question mark. "Couldn't sleep either, Monsieur Poirot?" "Sleep is for the innocent, mademoiselle, or the exhausted. I am neither." She exhaled, watching the smoke dissipate. "That pedestal! It's been the centre of every argument since I was a child. Who gets the wreath? Who deserves it? Who'll sell it the moment Aunt Evelyn's cold?" "And you?" Poirot asked softly. "What do you believe?" She tapped ash into a nearby urn. "I believe jewels are just rocks with good marketing. But try telling that to Julian, or Felix, or—" She stopped, eyes narrowing. "You're here because something's wrong, aren't you? Aunt Evelyn didn't invite the great Hercule Poirot for the mince pies." Poirot inclined his head. "Let us say I am insurance against irregularities." Clarissa laughed, a sound without mirth. "Then you'll earn your fee. This house is a powder keg dressed in tinsel." She stubbed out her cigarette. "Midnight tomorrow, that's when it happens. The unveiling, and God help anyone who stands between the wreath and its rightful owner." She swept past him, her perfume, jasmine and something darker, lingering like a threat. Poirot remained by the pedestal, the candle now a stub. Somewhere in the drawing-room, a clock chimed 11. The quartet had moved on to Silent Night, the notes floating through the hall like ghosts. He touched the crushed berry again. Holly, symbolic of protection, of sacrifice, and, in some traditions, of blood. Tomorrow, the wreath would be unveiled. Tonight, the seeds of discord had been sown with every toast, every glance, every unspoken accusation. Poirot turned away, his reflection fragmented in the polished silver of a nearby candelabrum. Somewhere in this house, a plan was forming, clever, perhaps desperate. But Hercule Poirot had faced cleverness before, and desperation was merely passion with its mask slipped. He climbed the stairs to the blue room, the anchor charm heavy in his pocket. Outside, the snow had stopped, leaving the world hushed and expectant. Inside, the manor slept, or pretended to. But Poirot's little grey cells were wide awake, turning over possibilities like a magician palming cards. The feast was over. The game had truly begun. Chapter 4. Whispers in the Holly. The grandfather clock in the entrance hall had just struck 3 when Hercule Poirot closed the door of the blue room behind him. He did not undress. Instead, he sat in the winged armchair beside the dying fire, legs crossed, hands steepled beneath his chin. The house was not asleep. It was pretending. Willowbrook Manor breathed around him, pipes ticking, beams settling, snow sliding from the eaves with soft thuds that sounded, to his attuned ear, like muffled footsteps. He had left the feast with the taste of brandy butter still on his tongue, and the image of 14 faces burned into memory. Each had worn a mask: Julian's brittle charm, Clarissa's cool disdain, Felix's transatlantic swagger, Captain Hargreaves's barely leashed fury. Even Lady Evelyn, gracious hostess, had flickered once, twice, when the wreath was mentioned, a tightening at the corners of her mouth, a glance toward the tapestry that concealed the safe. Poirot rose, silent as a cat, and opened his travelling case. From a velvet-lined compartment, he withdrew a small leather notebook and the fountain pen with green ink. On the first page he wrote, "Willowbrook, Christmas Eve, observations pedestal candle, guttering at 2307, replaced at 2314 by footman, name, crushed hollyberry on velvet, fresh, juice still wet. Clarissa Hawthorne, cigarette ash in urn shaped like Greek crater, ash cold, smoked earlier. Briggs, stood at dining hall door entire evening, left at 22:58, returned 23:17, 19 minutes unaccounted. Miss Frost, plate untouched after consommé, left table 22:43, returned 22:51, 8 minutes, safe behind tapestry, Yale combination 6-digit. Audible click when Julian passed at 22:31. Testing, he paused, then added motive, inheritance, Julian, greed, Felix, resentment, Clarissa, desperation unknown. He closed the notebook, slipped it into his breast pocket, and donned a dark dressing gown of quilted silk. The corridor outside was lit by a single gas sconce turned low, its flame trembling like a guilty conscience. Poirot stepped into the shadows. The upper landing formed a gallery around the stairwell. Portraits glared down, hawthorns in ruffs, periwigs, and Victorian mourning. One, a woman in emerald velvet, bore the wreath in her lap like a sleeping child. The painted gems glittered even in the dimness. Poirot paused beneath her, noting the artist's signature. E. Hawthorne, 1897, a relation. The brushwork was confident, almost defiant. A door opened softly to his left. Miss Felicity Frost emerged from what must be the secretary's room, wrapped in a camel-hair dressing gown, hair loose about her shoulders. She carried a small oil lamp. Seeing Poirot, she froze. "Monsieur Poirot, I couldn't sleep. The accounts for the estate, they're unbalanced. At 3 in the morning?" Poirot's tone was gentle, but his eyes were sharp. "Come, mademoiselle, let us walk. The cold clears the mind." She hesitated, then fell into step beside him. They descended the servants' stair at the rear, a narrow spiral of stone worn smooth by generations of feet. The lamp cast long shadows that danced like conspirators. "You are troubled," Poirot observed. "It is not the accounts." Miss Frost's laugh was brittle. "You see too much. It's the wreath. Lady Evelyn received a letter yesterday, anonymous. It said—" She lowered her voice. "It said the wreath would be stolen before the unveiling. That blood would crown the holly." Poirot's moustache twitched. "And this letter, where is it?" "Burned. She threw it in the library fire. But she's frightened. She pretends not. But I've worked for her 7 years. I know." They reached the ground floor. The kitchen regions lay beyond a green baize door, but Miss Frost led him left, toward the conservatory. Moonlight filtered through the glass roof, turning the snow outside into a silver sea. Palms and ferns loomed like sentinels. A lemon tree drooped under the weight of unripe fruit. "She asked me to check the safe at midnight," Miss Frost continued. "I did. The combination hadn't been touched. But this morning she stopped beneath a cascade of mistletoe hung from the iron rafters. This morning the holly garland above the library door was torn, berries scattered like gunshot." Poirot knelt, examining the floor. A single berry lay half hidden beneath a fern frond. He picked it up. The skin was split, the juice dark. "The same as on the pedestal," he murmured. "Someone is leaving a trail." or marking territory. Miss Frost shivered. There's more. Captain Hargreaves, he was in the library at 2. I saw the light under the door. He said he was looking for a book on artillery, but... She trailed off. But the artillery shelves are in the billiard room, Poirot finished. Yes, I noticed. A bell rang faintly somewhere in the servants' quarters, sharp, insistent. Miss Frost started. That's the housekeeper. She'll wonder where I am. She turned to go, then paused. Monsieur Poirot, be careful. This house keeps its secrets in the walls. She vanished through the baize door, lamp bobbing like a will-o'-the-wisp. Poirot remained beneath the mistletoe, turning the berry between gloved fingers. Then he moved on. The library was a cavern of leather and vellum, the air thick with the scent of old paper and older grudges. A fire had been banked low. Embers glowed like watchful eyes. Poirot's gaze swept the room, the globe that opened to reveal a Tantalus, the chess table with a game half finished. White had sacrificed a bishop for dubious gain, the tapestry safe. He crossed to it, ears straining, no sound from within. He was about to lift the tapestry when a floorboard creaked behind him. He whirled, too late. A figure lunged from the shadows, something glinting in its hand. Poirot twisted, years of reflex saving him. The blade, a letter opener shaped like a dagger, slashed through empty air and embedded in the tapestry with a thud. The attacker was masked in black silk, eyes wild above it. Before Poirot could grapple, a second figure appeared. Briggs the chauffeur in shirt-sleeves, fists like hams. He seized the masked assailant by the collar and hurled him against the bookshelves. Volumes rained down. Gibbon, Thackeray, a first edition of Dracula that would make a collector weep. "Got you!" Briggs growled. The mask slipped. Beneath it, Julian Hawthorne, hair dishevelled, eyes blazing with a mixture of fury and fear. "Julian!" Lady Evelyn's voice cut through the chaos. She stood in the doorway wrapped in a peacock silk robe, flanked by Clarissa and Felix. Behind them, Captain Hargreaves limped forward, cane tapping ominously. Julian struggled in Briggs's grip. "Let go! I thought it was a burglar." At 3 a.m. Clarissa's tone could have frozen the Thames. In the library. Poirot retrieved the letter opener, examining the blade. No blood, thankfully. "Monsieur Julian, you have a peculiar method of greeting nocturnal visitors. Perhaps you feared I was after the combination." Julian's face flushed crimson. "I heard footsteps. I came to investigate, that's all." Lady Evelyn descended upon her nephew like a storm cloud. "In a mask? With a weapon? Explain yourself!" But Julian clamped his mouth shut, eyes defiant. Briggs released him with a shove that sent him sprawling into an armchair. "Enough," Poirot said quietly. The room fell silent. "We are all overwrought. Monsieur Julian will retire to his room, under guard." He nodded to Briggs. "You will ensure he does not wander again tonight." Briggs inclined his head. "Yes, sir." As Briggs marched Julian away, Lady Evelyn turned to Poirot, her composure cracking. "What is happening to my house?" "Someone wishes to frighten you, madame, or to test the defences. The letter, the holly, now this. Theatrical assault." Poirot gestured to the scattered books. "It is a pattern, but patterns can be broken." Clarissa knelt, picking up the fallen Dracula. "Appropriate reading for the season," she murmured, "though I'd have chosen Macbeth. All that blood and ambition." Felix snorted. "Julian's ambition is about as subtle as a sledgehammer, but attempted murder. That's a new low, even for him." "Silence," Lady Evelyn snapped. "We will speak of this in the morning. Monsieur Poirot, I trust you to get to the bottom of it." Poirot bowed. "You may rely upon the little grey cells, madame." The party dispersed, footsteps echoing like retreating thunder. Poirot remained, restoring order with methodical care. He righted the chess pieces. White's sacrifice had been reckless. Black was poised to deliver checkmate in 3 moves. A metaphor, perhaps. When the room was tidy, he approached the tapestry. The letter opener had sliced through St. George's dragon, revealing the safe beneath. The dial was untouched, but a faint scratch marred the brass. New, deliberate. Someone had been here before Julian's melodramatic entrance. Poirot traced the scratch with a fingertip. "Ah, mes amis," he whispered to the empty room. "You play a dangerous game, but Hercule Poirot has played against masters, and always, always he wins." He replaced the tapestry, extinguished the lamp, and returned to the blue room. Dawn was still hours away, but sleep was impossible. He sat by the window, watching snowflakes drift past like coded messages. Somewhere in the manor, a clock chimed 4. Poirot opened his notebook and added a new line. Julian's mask, silk, monogrammed JH in corner. Found in his room? Or planted? He underlined the word planted twice. The holly berries, the anonymous letter, the midnight prowlers, threads in a tapestry of deception. Tomorrow was Christmas Eve. The wreath would be unveiled at midnight. And someone, Poirot was certain, intended to ensure that unveiling never happened. He closed the notebook, rested his head against the chairback, and allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. The little grey cells were humming now. A symphony of deduction. Let the conspirators scheme. Let the snow fall thicker than guilt. Hercule Poirot was ready. Chapter 5. The Midnight Theft. The house woke to a hush so complete it felt like the aftermath of a scream. Snow had piled against the windows in drifts that swallowed the lower panes, turning Willowbrook Manor into a lantern glowing in a white void. Servants moved on silent feet. The kitchen fires were stoked early, but no clatter of pans disturbed the stillness. At 9 o'clock precisely, Briggs appeared at Poirot's door with a tray. Coffee black as midnight, a single croissant, and the Morning Post. 3 letters, all addressed in the same hurried hand. Poirot broke the first seal while the coffee steamed. "You have been warned. The wreath leaves tonight. Interfere and pay the price. No signature." The paper was cheap, the ink smudged. The second and third letters were identical. Poirot laid them side by side, then sniffed the paper. Faint scent of coal tar soap, the sort used in the servants' quarters. He tucked the notes into his notebook beside the hollyberry evidence and dressed with his usual precision. Charcoal suit, waistcoat of dove grey, tie pin, a tiny emerald that winked like a conspirator. Downstairs, the dining room was half empty. Lady Evelyn sat alone at the head of the table, pale but composed, a letter of her own crumpled in her fist. Clarissa buttered toast with mechanical strokes. Julian was absent, confined to his room under Briggs's watchful eye. Captain Hargreaves had taken breakfast in the gun-room, polishing revolvers with the devotion of a monk at prayer. Felix Lang swaggered in late, smelling of Florida water and last night's brandy. "Morning all," he drawled. "Snow's a foot deep and rising. Looks like we're marooned with the family jewels. How cosy." Lady Evelyn's eyes flashed. "The wreath will be unveiled at midnight, Felix, as planned. Monsieur Poirot has assured me the threats are contained." Poirot inclined his head. "Contained, madame, is perhaps optimistic. Observed, certainly. I have requested that the safe be opened now, in daylight, with witnesses. We will inventory the wreath and photograph it. After that, it remains under guard until the ceremony. Clarissa set down her knife. And if someone objects, then they will explain their objection to Hercule Poirot, he replied smoothly, and the local constabulary, should the need arise. The constabulary, in the person of Sergeant Meadows, a stout red-faced man who had arrived on skis at dawn, stood awkwardly in the hall, helmet under one arm, notebook in the other. Poirot had telephoned Oxford at first light. The sergeant's presence was a formality, but formalities had a way of unnerving the guilty. At 10 o'clock, the party assembled in the library. The tapestry was drawn back with a theatrical swish. Lady Evelyn spun the combination. Her birthday, Poirot noted, 14-03, 1877, while Briggs and Sergeant Meadows stood ready. The safe door swung open on well-oiled hinges. Inside lay a rosewood box lined with black velvet. Lady Evelyn lifted it with reverence, set it on the library table, and opened the lid. The hawthorn wreath gleamed like a captured constellation. It was smaller than Poirot had imagined, no wider than a dinner plate, but every inch was exquisite. A circlet of blackened silver, twisted like holly stems, cradled emeralds the size of thumbnails. Rubies formed berries, each faceted to catch the light and throw it back in blood-red sparks. At the front, a diamond the size of a quail's egg blazed with cold fire. Catherine's diamond, legend claimed. The craftsmanship was Renaissance, the setting Victorian. It was both relic and ransom. Monsieur Frost produced a magnifying glass. Poirot examined each stone, each claw, each hinge. No scratches, no substitutions. He nodded to the sergeant, who snapped 3 photographs with a bulky Kodak. Clarissa sketched the wreath in a leather-bound book, her pencil flying. Julian, escorted downstairs under protest, watched from the doorway, face unreadable. "Perfect," Lady Evelyn breathed. "Lock it away again. Midnight will be soon enough." The box was returned, the safe closed, the tapestry replaced. Briggs took up station outside the library door. Sergeant Meadows was given a room above the stables. "For the look of the thing," Poirot said. The house exhaled, tension easing like a fist unclenching. But Poirot was not eased. At 11:30 he slipped into the conservatory. The glass was fogged, condensation ran in rivulets. He traced a finger through the moisture, drawing a tiny wreath. Footprints in the gravel outside, small, deliberate, led from the French doors to the yew hedge and vanished into snow. Someone had been watching the library windows. He returned inside, senses prickling. Lunch was a desultory affair. Cold cuts, pickled walnuts, silence thick as sweat. After, the guests scattered, some to the billiard room, others to write letters that would never reach the post. Poirot retired to the blue room and waited. Dusk fell early, the sky a bruised violet. At 6 the house lights flickered. Generator strain, Briggs explained. Candles were lit in sconces, casting pools of gold. Dinner was postponed. The cook had taken to her bed with nerves. At 8 the party gathered in the drawing-room for mulled wine and carols. Mr. Quill read Dickens by the fire. Miss Wren sculpted a tiny snow Poirot from marzipan. Laughter was forced. Eyes kept straying to the clock. At 11:15, Poirot excused himself. He met Briggs in the corridor. "Anything?" he asked. Briggs shook his head. "Quiet as a crypt. Sergeant's doing rounds. I've got the key to the library. No one's been near." Poirot nodded. "Remain here. If anyone approaches, detain them." He climbed the main staircase, paused on the landing. A draught whispered from the east wing, Julian's room. The door was ajar. Poirot moved silently, pushed it open. The room was empty. Bed unslept in, window latched. On the desk, a single holly berry, fresh, glistening. Poirot's pulse quickened. He descended the servant's stair, emerged in the kitchen passage. A shadow detached itself from the pantry. Cook, flour on her apron, eyes wide. "Mr. Poirot! There's someone in the cellar!" He was already moving. The cellar door stood open, stairs descending into darkness. He took them two at a time, revolver in hand. The air was cold, damp, smelling of coal and apples. A lantern glowed ahead. Captain Hargreaves stood before the wine racks, a bottle in one hand, revolver in the other. He spun at Poirot's approach. "Poirot! What the devil? Captain, you're far from the drawing-room. Needed a drop of the good stuff. Couldn't sleep." Hargreaves's eyes were bloodshot, but steady. "Heard a noise down here. Thought I'd investigate." Poirot's gaze swept the cellar. A coal scuttle lay overturned. Footprints led to a narrow door. The old icehouse tunnel, bricked up decades ago. Fresh scratches marred the mortar. "Someone has been busy," Poirot murmured. He holstered the revolver. "Return upstairs, Captain. Briggs will escort you." Hargreaves opened his mouth to protest, then thought better. He limped away, bottle clutched like a talisman. Poirot examined the door. The bricks were loose. A panel had been removed and replaced carelessly. Beyond, a crawl space, earth floor, the glint of a jemmy. He crawled through, emerged in the old ice pit, now a storeroom for garden tools. A rope ladder dangled from a hatch above, leading to the grounds. Snow had drifted in, half burying a dark bundle. He unwrapped it. Black cloak, silk mask, monogram JH, and a duplicate key to the library safe. Wax impression still soft. Poirot's moustache bristled with satisfaction. A plant, as he had suspected. But whose? He returned via the cellar, relocked the door and climbed to the library. Briggs stood guard, immovable. "Anything?" Poirot asked. "Not a soul." Poirot checked his watch. 11:47, 30 minutes to midnight. He entered the library alone. The safe was as they had left it. He spun the dial, 14:03, 1877, opened the door. The rosewood box was there, but the wreath was gone. In its place, a single sprig of holly, berries glistening like fresh blood, and a note in the same hurried hand. "The crown is claimed. Merry Christmas." Poirot stared for a heartbeat, only one, then whirled. The tapestry had been slit again, but from the inside. A panel in the wainscoting stood ajar, revealing a priest's hole no wider than a coffin. He squeezed through, emerged in the minstrel's gallery above the entrance hall. Below, the household was assembling for the unveiling. Lady Evelyn stood by the pedestal, face pale as parchment. Clarissa clutched Julian's arm. Julian, who had somehow escaped confinement. Felix checked his watch. Captain Hargreaves leaned on his cane, eyes darting. Miss Frost hovered with a silver salver, trembling. Poirot descended the gallery stairs two at a time. The clock began to strike midnight, 12 sonorous chimes that vibrated through the bones of the house. Lady Evelyn opened the library door, Briggs at her side. She crossed to the safe, spun the dial. The door swung open, a collective gasp. Lady Evelyn lifted the rosewood box with shaking hands, set it on the pedestal, opened the lid. The holly sprig lay there, mocking. For a moment, no one moved. Then chaos erupted. Shouts, accusations, Clarissa's shrill cry of "Julian!" Felix's laughter cracking like ice. Captain Hargreaves raised his cane as if to strike. Poirot stepped forward, voice cutting, through the din like a blade. Silence! 14 faces turned. Snowlight from the high windows bathed them in silver. "The wreath is gone," Poirot said calmly, "but it has not left the house. The thief is clever, very clever, but they have made one mistake." He held up the duplicate key, let it dangle from his finger. This was found in the icehouse tunnel. The original remains with Briggs. Therefore, the thief had access to the library after 10 this morning, and before 11:47 tonight. Who, mesdames et messieurs, can account for every minute of that time? Silence fell, heavier than the snow outside. Poirot's gaze swept the room, lingering on each face. Julian's defiance, Clarissa's calculation, Felix's smirk, Hargreaves's scowl, Miss Frost's terror. Someone among you, he continued, has orchestrated a charade. The anonymous letters, the holly berries, the masked assault, the duplicate key, all to create confusion. But confusion is the enemy of order, and Hercule Poirot is the champion of order. Lady Evelyn found her voice. Then find it, monsieur. Find my wreath. Poirot bowed. I shall, madame, before the cock crows, or in this case, before the Yule log burns to ash. He turned to Briggs. Lock every external door. Post Sergeant Meadows at the front. No one leaves this house. As Briggs moved to obey, Poirot's eyes fell on the holly sprig. A single berry had rolled to the edge of the pedestal and fallen, plop, onto the parquet. He knelt, picked it up. The juice was still wet. Somewhere in the manor, a clock chimed the quarter hour. The theft was 13 minutes old, and the game, Poirot reflected with grim satisfaction, had entered its endgame. Chapter 6. Interrogations by the Fire. The drawing-room fire had been fed until it roared like a caged lion, throwing long shadows across the coffered ceiling and turning every face into a mask of gold and black. Outside, the snow had ceased, leaving the world muffled and luminous under a half-moon. Inside, the 14 occupants of Willowbrook Manor sat in a rough semicircle, the pedestal with its empty rosewood box at the centre, like an altar to betrayal. Briggs stood behind Lady Evelyn's chair, arms folded, a silent Cerberus. Sergeant Meadows, helmet now on the mantel, notebook open, pencil poised, looked as if he had wandered into a play whose script was written in a foreign tongue. Hercule Poirot stood before the hearth, small and immaculate, the firelight glinting off his patent leather shoes. In one hand he held the duplicate key, in the other the holly sprig with its accusing berries. The room smelled of pine, beeswax and fear. Mesdames et messieurs, he began, voice soft yet carrying to the furthest corner, we are prisoners of the snow and of the truth. The hawthorn wreath has vanished between the hours of 10 this morning and 11:47 this night. The thief is among us. I will now establish who could not have taken it, and who, therefore, must have done so. A collective intake of breath. Clarissa's fingers tightened on the arms of her chair until the knuckles blanched. Julian stared at the carpet as though it might open and swallow him. Felix Lang lit a cigarette with deliberate nonchalance, the match flaring like a tiny accusation. Poirot began with the staff. Briggs, you were on duty outside the library from 10 o'clock until I relieved you at 11:15, correct? Correct, sir. Never left my post save to fetch Sergeant Meadows his cocoa at 10:30. Miss Frost brought it on a tray. I was gone 3 minutes. Miss Frost nodded confirmation, pale but composed. I was in the kitchen from 10:20 until 10:35. Cook and 3 maids can vouch for me. Cook, summoned from below stairs, confirmed with a nervous bob. The maids echoed her. Poirot turned to the guests. Lady Evelyn, after the safe was locked at 10, where were you? In the morning room, writing letters. Mrs. Finch sat with me until luncheon at 1. After luncheon, I napped until 4, then took tea with Clarissa and Miss Wren in the conservatory. From 6 until the drawing-room gathering, I was in my boudoir with Miss Frost, going over the seating plan. Clarissa corroborated the tea, Miss Wren the conservatory. Miss Frost produced the seating chart, ink still faintly damp. Captain Hargreaves, the captain shifted, cane tapping the floor. Gun room from 11 until 2, cleaning my Webley. Briggs saw me at noon when he brought coal. Luncheon in the dining room, everyone was there. After billiards with Felix until 5. Then the cellar at 11:30. You found me yourself. Felix grinned. He's a rotten shot but a fair partner at snooker. I was with him from 2 until 5, then in the library reading until 7. Mr. Quill was there, composing odes to snowdrifts. Mr. Quill adjusted his monocle. Indeed. I left at 7 for a brandy in the smoking room. Felix remained until the carols began at 8. Poirot's gaze moved to Julian. Monsieur Hawthorne, you were confined to your room after the incident with the letter-opener. How then did you appear in the hall at midnight? Julian's jaw worked. I picked the lock. Child's play. I heard the clock strike 12 and came down to see the unveiling. That's all. Yet you were seen in the east corridor at 11:20 by the housemaid, carrying a bundle. Julian flushed. I was fetching my dressing gown from the linen press. Ask her. The housemaid, trembling, confirmed she had seen Master Julian with a blue quilted garment. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And between 10 this morning and 11:47 tonight, where were you? Room, all day. Briggs brought meals. I read, slept. That's it. Briggs inclined his head. He never left my sight, sir, save when I fetched the trays. Door was locked each time I returned. Poirot turned to Clarissa. Mademoiselle, your movements? Conservatory with Aunt Evelyn until 4, then the music room, practicing carols on the pianoforte until 6. Dr. Black joined me at 5:30. We discussed Freud until dinner was postponed. After, the drawing room with everyone. Dr. Black nodded solemnly. She played in Dulce Jubilo with considerable feeling. The artists Crane, Wren, Mrs. Finch provided alibis in overlapping pairs. Studio, morning room, billiard room, each corroborated by another. No gaps wider than 10 minutes, none near the library. Poirot paced, the firelight dancing across his face. Very well, we have a perfect circle of alibis, yet the wreath is gone. Therefore, the theft was not the work of one person acting alone, but of 2 or more who provided cover for each other. He held up the duplicate key. This was made from a wax impression. The original key never left Briggs's pocket. Therefore, the impression was taken before 10 this morning, when the safe was opened in our presence. Who had access to Briggs's pocket before 10? A pause. Briggs frowned. I was in the kitchen at 9:30, helping cook with the Yule log. My coat was on the hook by the door. Anyone could have— Anyone, Poirot echoed. But who knew the safe would be opened at 10? Only those present at breakfast. Lady Evelyn, Clarissa, Felix, myself. The staff were informed at 9:45 by Miss Frost. Miss Frost's hand flew to her mouth. I told cook, the footman, Briggs. Exactly. The circle widens. Poirot placed the holly sprig on the mantel. These berries appear at every stage. The pedestal, the conservatory, the safe. They are not random. They are signatures. Someone wishes us to follow a trail. He turned to Julian. Monsieur, the mask found in the ice house, monogrammed J.H. Was it yours? Julian hesitated. I have one similar, but it's in my room. Show me. Briggs escorted Julian upstairs. They returned 5 minutes later. Julian held a black silk mask, identical, but the monogram read F.L. Felix Lang. Felix's cigarette paused halfway to his lips. Well, I'll be damned. That's mine. Lost it last week in London. Thought I'd left it in a taxi." Poirot's smile was thin, convenient, or perhaps planted, like the key to implicate another. He faced the room. "Let us reconstruct. The thief needed access to Briggs's key before 10. Opportunity to enter the library unseen between 10 and 11:47. A hiding place for the wreath until it could be removed from the house. The snow prevents removal tonight. Therefore, the wreath is still within these walls." Lady Evelyn rose, voice trembling with rage. "Search the rooms, every trunk, every drawer." Poirot lifted a hand. "Unnecessary, madame. The thief is clever, but not clever enough to hide a circlet of emeralds in a shoe. The wreath is in a place one would think to look, because it is in plain sight." He crossed to the Christmas tree, its branches heavy with ornaments. At the very top, nestled among the glass icicles, something glinted. Poirot reached up, carefully, reverently, and lifted down a silver salver. Upon it lay the hawthorn wreath, berries of holly threaded through its silver stems, the great diamond catching the firelight and throwing it back in 1,000 shards. A collective gasp. Lady Evelyn pressed a hand to her heart. Poirot turned the wreath in his hands. The perfect hiding place? Who would suspect the Christmas tree itself? The holly was added to disguise the gleam of jewels among the tinsel. The salver, borrowed from the dining room, elevated it above suspicion. He looked at Miss Frost. "Mademoiselle, you carried the salver at midnight. Did you not notice the weight?" Miss Frost shook her head, tears starting. "I thought it was the candlesticks." "No," Poirot said gently. "You knew, because you placed it there." The room froze. Miss Frost took one step back, then another, until Briggs's hand closed on her arm. "It is over, mademoiselle," Poirot said. "The anonymous letters, written on servant's paper, scented with coal tar soap from your own room. The holly berries, gathered from the conservatory where you met me at 3. The duplicate key, pressed while you brought Briggs his cocoa. You had access to every corridor, every confidence, and the motive?" He turned to Lady Evelyn. "Madame, you told me the estate accounts were unbalanced. Miss Frost has been embezzling for years. Small sums, clever sums. The wreath was to be sold, the money to cover her thefts. But she needed a scapegoat. Julian, with his mask and his temper. Felix with his greed. Even Captain Hargreaves prowling the cellar. She scattered clues like breadcrumbs." Miss Frost sagged in Briggs's grip. "I only wanted to be free," she whispered. 7 years of ledgers, and bowing, and scraping. Lady Evelyn's face was stone. "You would have destroyed my family's honour for your freedom." Sergeant Meadows stepped forward, cuffs ready. Miss Frost did not resist. Poirot placed the wreath in Lady Evelyn's hands. "It is returned, madame, untouched. The unveiling may proceed, at dawn, perhaps, when the light is kinder." The fire crackled. Outside, the snow began to fall again, soft as forgiveness. Julian found his voice. I thought it was me they were after, the mask." "Planted," Poirot said, "as was the key, a clever misdirection." Felix stubbed out his cigarette. "Well, I'll be damned, the mouse roars." Captain Hargreaves raised his glass. Brandy this time. To Poirot, and to Christmas miracles. The toast was taken up, ragged but genuine. Miss Frost was led away. The wreath gleamed in Lady Evelyn's lap, its diamond winking like a star. Poirot allowed himself a small bow. "The little grey cells, miss, Amie. They do not celebrate Noel, but they deliver justice all the same." The clock struck 1. The fire settled into embers. And somewhere in the manor, a new log was laid on the Yule fire, ready to burn through the longest night. The mystery was solved, but the story, Poirot reflected as he climbed the stairs, was far from over. Chapter 7. Shadows of the past dawn crept over Willowbrook Manor like a thief, pale and reluctant, turning the snow to rose gold. The house stirred slowly. Shutters creaked, pipes clanked, a single blackbird sang from the frozen yew. In the great hall, the Christmas tree stood sentinel, its stolen wreath restored to the rosewood box on the pedestal, the holly sprigs removed and burned in the kitchen range. Miss Felicity Frost had been taken to the stables under Sergeant Meadows's watchful eye, her confession signed in a spidery hand that trembled across the page. The embezzlement, the forged letters, the duplicate key, all laid bare. Yet Poirot, descending the staircase at 7:30 sharp, felt the familiar prickle at the base of his skull. The little grey cells were not satisfied. He paused on the half-landing. A portrait he had not noticed before hung there. A young woman in riding habit, dark hair coiled beneath a velvet cap, eyes the colour of winter seas. At her throat glinted the hawthorn wreath, smaller then, reset for a smaller neck. The brass plate read, Miss Beatrice Hawthorne, 1897. The same year as the portrait, he recalled, the portrait in the gallery. The same defiant brushwork. Poirot's moustache twitched. He continued downward. The dining room smelled of coffee and bacon. Lady Evelyn sat alone, the wreath box before her like a reliquary. She looked up as Poirot entered. Monsieur, you are early. Truth, madame, does not keep gentlemen's hours. He took the chair opposite. The wreath, it has a twin, non? She started. A twin. The portrait on the landing, Beatrice Hawthorne. She wears an identical piece, yet the central diamond is absent. Explain. Lady Evelyn's fingers traced the box lid. Beatrice was my aunt. Wild, brilliant, ruined. In 1897 she eloped with an Italian count. Penniless, charming. My grandfather pursued them to Venice, bought back the wreath with half the family fortune. Beatrice kept a copy, paste stones, silver gilt. She wore it to mock him. The original diamond was added later from Catherine's dowry. Poirot leaned forward. And the copy? Where is it now? Lost. Burned in a fire at Beatrice's villa in 1912, or so the story goes. Lady Evelyn's smile was brittle. Family legends, monsieur. They grow in the telling. A footman entered with fresh coffee. Poirot waited until the door closed. Yet last night, when the wreath was returned, I examined it closely. The central setting, the claws that hold the diamond, they are newer than the rest. Victorian, yes, but not 1843. And the silver stems bear marks. A tiny hammer, a crescent moon. Venetian hallmarks, madame, from the 1890s. Lady Evelyn's cup rattled in its saucer. You are mistaken. Am I? Poirot opened his notebook, withdrew a folded sheet, Miss Frost's confession. Your secretary claims she intended to sell the wreath to a dealer in Amsterdam. Yet the dealer's letter, found in her room, specifies the Beatrice copy, paste stones acceptable. Why would a thief risk everything for a fake? The colour drained from Lady Evelyn's face. Because the real wreath was never in the safe. Silence stretched, taut as a wire. Poirot's voice was gentle. Tell me, madame, from the beginning. Lady Evelyn rose, crossed to the window. Snow light bathed her in silver. 3 months ago, she said, I received a visitor. A woman, veiled, elegant, voice like smoke. She claimed to be Beatrice's granddaughter, Sophia de Lauro. She produced papers, a locket with Beatrice's portrait, a marriage certificate, a bill of sale for the copy. She said the original wreath had been switched in Venice. My grandfather brought home the fake, believing it real. The true wreath, with Catherine's diamond, had passed through her family for generations. And you believed her? I wanted to. The estate is bankrupt, monsieur. Debts from my husband's gambling. dry rot in the west wing, taxes that devour the rents. The wreath, real or fake, was all that remained. Sophia offered to exchange the true wreath for the copy, plus £50,000, enough to save Willowbrook. Poirot's eyes narrowed. You agreed. I did. Last week she came again. We opened the safe together. The wreath inside was paste and gilt, beautiful but worthless. She left the true one, took the copy, and vanished into the snow. I locked the real wreath away, planning to announce the miracle at the unveiling, a Christmas gift to the family. Yet you invited Hercule Poirot? She turned, eyes glittering, because I suspected Sophia would return. The 50,000 was a promissory note. She demanded the diamond itself. I refused. Then the letters began, the holly, the mask. I thought she had an accomplice inside the house. Poirot considered. Miss Frost. No. Felicity discovered the switch when balancing the insurance ledger. She confronted me yesterday morning. I confessed. She offered to help stage the theft, return the wreath to the tree, blame an outsider, preserve the secret, but she lied. She intended to sell the real one and flee. Poirot rose. And the true wreath, where is it now? Lady Evelyn opened the rosewood box. Inside, nestled in velvet, lay the wreath. But the emeralds were dull, the rubies cloudy, the great diamond a flawless piece of glass. Paste, she whispered. Sophia switched them again. Last night, while we searched for the stolen one, she took the real wreath and left this. Poirot lifted the circlet. Light as a promise, heavy as a lie. Then the game is not over, madame. The thief is not Miss Frost alone. A bell rang, sharp, urgent. Briggs appeared in the doorway. Sir, the stables, Sergeant Meadows, he's been attacked, bound and gagged, and the motor sled, gone, Poirot finished, with Sophia de Lauro and the true wreath. He strode into the hall, Lady Evelyn at his heels. The household assembled, bleary-eyed, questions tumbling. Poirot raised a hand. Listen carefully. The wreath you saw last night was a forgery. The real one, Catherine's diamond, Venetian silver, left this house at dawn. Our thief is a woman, dark, elegant, driving a motor sled. She cannot have gone far. The roads are impassable. Captain Hargreaves limped forward. The old ice road, across the frozen moat to the north gate. It's treacherous, but a sled could make it. Poirot nodded to Briggs. The rolls, chains on the wheels, we follow. Minutes later, the phantom roared to life. Briggs at the wheel, Poirot beside him. Captain Hargreaves in the dicky, with a shotgun across his knees. Lady Evelyn insisted on coming. Wrapped in furs, the paste wreath clutched like a talisman. The ice road was a white ribbon between skeletal willows. Tracks, narrow, deep, cut through the snow, veering toward the woods. The rolls fish-tailed, chains biting. Poirot's eyes scanned the tree line. There! Hargreaves shouted. A red motor sled, sleek as a fox, burst from the trees half a mile ahead. A figure in black leathers crouched over the controls, scarf whipping like a banner. Briggs floored the accelerator. The rolls surged, closing the gap. The sled swerved, engine screaming, snow sprayed in a rooster tail. Poirot leaned out, wind tearing at his coat. Stop! In the name of the law! The figure glanced back. Dark eyes, a flash of white teeth. A woman, unmistakably. She throttled higher, the sled leaping adrift. Hargreaves raised the shotgun. Shall I? No, Poirot snapped. We need her alive. The chase thundered across the ice. The moat groaned beneath them, cracks spidering. The sled veered left, toward a stand of pines. Suddenly, it slewed, engine coughing. Smoke poured from the cowling. Overheated! Briggs yelled. The sled ground to a halt. The woman leapt clear, sprinting for the trees, a leather satchel slung across her body. Poirot was out before the rolls stopped, boots crunching snow. "Arrêtez!" She ran like a deer, but the drifts were deep. Poirot gained, lungs burning. 10 yards, 5. He lunged, tackling her into a snowbank. They rolled, powder flying. Her fist connected with his jaw. He tasted blood. Then Hargreaves was there, pinning her arms. The satchel spilled open. The true hawthorn wreath tumbled out, diamond blazing in the morning sun. Sophia de Lauro, unmasked now, beautiful and furious, spat snow. "You meddling little man!" Poirot rose, brushing crystals from his coat. "Mademoiselle, you have style, but style without honour is merely costume." Briggs arrived with rope. Lady Evelyn knelt in the snow, cradling the wreath, tears freezing on her lashes. Back at the manor, Sophia was installed in the gun-room under lock and key. The true wreath, verified by Poirot's loupe, the Venetian marks clear, was returned to the safe. The paste copy was consigned to the fire. Lady Evelyn faced her household in the hall, wreath gleaming at her throat. "The secret is ended," she declared. "Willowbrook is saved, not by jewels, but by truth. Monsieur Poirot has unmasked 2 thieves, one of greed, one of blood. Let this be our Christmas lesson." Julian stepped forward, shamefaced. "Aunt Evelyn, I knew about the switch. Sophia contacted me in London, offered a share if I helped. I refused, but I didn't tell you." Clarissa's eyes flashed. "And I found the paste wreath in the attic weeks ago. Thought it a curiosity. Kept silent." Felix laughed ruefully. "Hell, I bid on the fake in Amsterdam. Thought I was buying the real thing." One by one, confessions tumbled. Petty secrets, harmless lies, the currency of families. Poirot listened, saying nothing. At noon the snow began to melt. Sergeant Meadows telephoned Oxford. A plough was promised by evening. Sophia de Lauro would face charges in Italy and England. Miss Frost, tearful, was offered leniency for her testimony. Poirot stood alone in the conservatory, watching water drip from the glass roof. Lady Evelyn joined him. "You knew," she said quietly, "from the first." "I suspected. The holly, the masks, the perfect alibis, too theatrical. A distraction from the greater deception. But the little grey cells, madame, they do not lie." She touched the wreath at her throat. "What now?" "Now you sell the paste copy to a museum. Label it the Hawthorne Forgery, 1897. Tourists will pay handsomely for a scandal. And the real wreath," Poirot smiled, "wear it. Let it remind you that even shadows have substance, if one knows where to look." Outside, the blackbird sang again. Inside, the manor exhaled. Secrets burned away like morning mist. Christmas Day dawned clear and cold. The unveiling proceeded at noon, sunlight streaming through the windows, the true wreath blazing on Lady Evelyn's brow. Poirot watched from the back, content. The mystery was solved, the past laid to rest, and Hercule Poirot, for once, allowed himself a second helping of figgy pudding. Chapter 8. The Poisoned Mistletoe. The sun of Christmas Day had barely cleared the yews when the bells of the village church, 3 miles away and muffled by snow, sent a faint, wavering peal across the white fields. Inside Willowbrook Manor the air was thick with the scent of roast goose, cloves, and relief. The true hawthorn wreath rested once more in the safe, its paste twin reduced to a twist of blackened wire in the breakfast-room grate. Sophia de Lauro and Miss Frost were locked in separate rooms, awaiting the Oxford constabulary. The family, chastened by confession, had agreed to a quiet day. Church for the devout, brandy for the sceptics, and a late luncheon at 3. Hercule Poirot, however, was not quiet. He stood in the conservatory, coat unbuttoned, examining a sprig of mistletoe that had fallen from the iron rafters during the night. The berries were white, waxy, perfect, except for one. A single berry had been pierced, a bead of clear liquid trembling at the puncture. He lifted it to his nose. Bitter almonds, faint but unmistakable. Cyanide. He wrapped the sprig in his handkerchief, pocketed it, and went in search of Briggs. The chauffeur was in the boot room, polishing the rolls until it gleamed like a black mirror. Briggs. Last night, after the wreath was returned to the safe, who entered the conservatory? Briggs did not pause in his circling. No one, sir. I locked the French doors myself at 1:30, keys on my ring. He patted the heavy bunch at his belt. And the mistletoe, when was it hung? 3 days ago. Miss Frost and the maids. Tradition says it must be up before Christmas Eve. Poirot nodded, and this morning found the fallen sprig when I opened the doors at 7, thought it had worked loose. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Show me. They crossed the hall. The conservatory was warm, humid, the glass fogged. The mistletoe still dangled in clusters, but one gap was obvious. A bare hook where the poisoned sprig had hung directly above the stone bench, where Lady Evelyn liked to take her morning coffee. Poirot knelt. On the bench, a faint ring of moisture, the size of a cup's base. Beside it, a single white berry crushed, its juice dried to a sticky smear. Someone sat here, he murmured, drank coffee, and waited. Briggs paled. Her ladyship takes coffee here every morning at 8, alone. Except today, Poirot said. Today she took it in the dining room with me. A change of habit, because I asked to discuss the insurance papers. A change that saved her life. He straightened. We have a third thief, Briggs. One who intended murder. The luncheon gong sounded. 3 sonorous notes. Poirot touched the chauffeur's arm. Say nothing yet, but watch the mistletoe, and the coffee pots. The dining room was transformed. White linen, holly centerpieces, the great silver apron filled with forced hyacinths. The family assembled in Sunday best, faces scrubbed of last night's guilt. Lady Evelyn presided, the true wreath now on a black velvet stand at her right hand, diamond flashing with every gesture. Julian poured wine with exaggerated care. Clarissa passed bread sauce, her smile brittle. Felix told an anecdote about prohibition that no one laughed at. Captain Hargreaves carved the goose with military precision. Poirot took his seat, eyes flicking to the mistletoe above the sideboard, fresh, innocent, berries intact. A footman poured coffee. Poirot watched the cups. Lady Evelyn's, Julian's, Clarissa's, his own. The pot was silver, lid hinged, spout narrow. No opportunity for tampering in plain sight. Yet the poison had been meant for the conservatory cup. He waited until the cheese course, Stilton, port, walnuts, then rose. Mesdames et messieurs, a toast. He lifted his glass. To truth, which is sharper than any blade, and to justice, which is sweeter than any pudding. They drank. Poirot's eyes never left the coffee pot. After luncheon, the party drifted to the drawing room for crackers and charades. Poirot slipped away, beckoning Briggs and Sergeant Meadows. In the library, he laid the poisoned sprig on the blotter. Cyanide, he said. Enough in one berry to kill a horse. The intended victim, Lady Evelyn. The method, a morning ritual. The motive, he paused. The wreath. Meadows scratched his head. But the wreath's safe. Safe, yes. But its existence is a threat. To whom? He opened his notebook, flipped to a fresh page. Poisoned mistletoe. Suspects Julian Hawthorne. Needs money. Wreath is his inheritance. If Aunt Evelyn dies, he sells immediately. Clarissa Hawthorne resents family obligation, believes Wreath should fund her independence. Felix Lang, American cousin, offered to buy Wreath last year for $100,000, refused. Captain Hargreaves, war pension gone, gambling debts. Wreath could clear them. Sophia de Lauro, already in custody, could have prepared poison earlier. Miss Frost, embezzler. Lady Evelyn's death would expose her. Poirot tapped the page. We eliminate. Sophia and Miss Frost were locked in their rooms by 7:30. Briggs has the keys. The conservatory was locked until 7. The poison was applied after 7, before 8, when Lady Evelyn would have sat beneath the mistletoe. Meadows frowned. That narrows it to the family. Or staff with access to the conservatory key. Poirot turned to Briggs. Who has a duplicate? Only one. In the butler's pantry, locked in the key cabinet. Mr. Graves has the cabinet key. Graves, the butler, was summoned. A dignified man of 60, side whiskers like white wings. The cabinet was opened at 6:30 this morning, he said. Cook needed the wine cellar key for the brandy butter. I unlocked it myself, relocked it at 6:45. No one else touched it. Poirot's eyes gleamed. And between 6:45 and 7? I was in the pantry, polishing the candelabra. The door was open. Anyone passing could have slipped in. The corridor outside the pantry led to the servants' stair and to the conservatory. Poirot dismissed Graves, then turned to Meadows. We set a trap. Tonight, under the mistletoe in the hall, where tradition demands a kiss at midnight, we place a decoy. Lady Evelyn will announce she has taken a sleeping draught and retired early. But she will be here, hidden. The coffee pot will be fresh, the cup marked. We watch. Meadows nodded slowly. And the bait? Poirot smiled. The wreath itself. Lady Evelyn will wear the paste copy, identical to the eye. The real one remains in the safe. If the poisoner strikes again, we have them. The plan was set. At 11:30 the house settled into expectant quiet. The Yule log crackled. Carols played softly on the gramophone. Lady Evelyn, pale but resolute, kissed each guest on the cheek and announced her retirement. The excitement has quite overcome me. Midnight kisses without me, I'm afraid. She climbed the stairs, paste wreath glittering at her throat. Poirot watched from the shadows of the minstrel's gallery. Briggs stood below the mistletoe, ostensibly adjusting the chandelier. Meadows lurked behind the suit of armour. The guests mingled, glasses clinking, voices hushed. At 11:55, Julian excused himself to fetch brandy. Clarissa drifted to the conservatory door, then thought better. Felix lit a cigarette beneath the mistletoe, exhaling toward the berries. Captain Hargreaves limped to the sideboard, poured coffee, black. No sugar, into a single cup. He carried it to the mistletoe, set it on the small table there. A tradition, the Christmas Eve toast beneath the kissing bough. Poirot's breath caught. The cup was unmarked china, any cup. But Hargreaves's eyes flicked upward, to the mistletoe, then to the stairs. He raised the cup. To absent friends, he said softly, and drank. Poirot leapt the gallery rail, landing cat-like. Arrêtez! Hargreaves froze, cup halfway to his lips. Poirot snatched it, sniffed, bitter almonds, faint but there. Captain, you toast with death. Hargreaves's face crumpled. I knew it was poisoned. I was ending it. The debts, the shame. He sank to his knees. Briggs caught him as he fell, froth at the corners of his mouth. Meadows bellowed for the doctor. Dr. Black roused from his room. Poirot knelt, loosened the captain's collar. How much? 3 berries, Hargreaves gasped. Crushed into the cup at 6:50. I saw Julian take the key, thought he meant to kill her. Couldn't let it happen. My fault. The gambling, the pressure on Evelyn. His eyes rolled back. Dr. Black pushed through, syringe in hand. Potassium ferrocyanide, if we're lucky." They carried Hargreaves to the morning room. Poirot followed, mind racing. Julian appeared, white-faced. "I took the key to check the safe, nothing else, I swear." Poirot believed him. The captain's confession rang true. A desperate man protecting a desperate woman, choosing suicide over scandal. Dr. Black emerged an hour later. He'll live, stomach pump and antidote, but he'll never forgive himself. Lady Evelyn, paste wreath discarded, sat beside the bed. "Reginald's debts were his, not yours," she told the captain. "You should have told me." Hargreaves turned his face to the wall. Midnight came and went. The four mistletoe hung innocent now, berries gleaming. Poirot stood beneath it alone. 3 thieves, Frost for greed, Sophia for legacy, Hargreaves for honour, twisted into despair. The wreath had survived them all. He looked up at the white berries. "You are persistent, mon petit poisson, but even you cannot kill Christmas." Outside, the snow began again, soft and forgiving. Inside, the manor slept, wounds cauterized by truth. Poirot climbed the stairs, the little grey cells quiet at last. Tomorrow the plough would come. The world would open, but tonight, under the mistletoe, justice had been served, with a kiss of cyanide and a draught of mercy. Chapter 9. Poirot's Gathering of Suspects. The morning of Boxing Day arrived with a sky the colour of tarnished pewter, and a wind that rattled the manor's leaded windows like an impatient creditor. The snow had hardened overnight into a crust sharp enough to cut boot leather. The promised plough from Oxford had not appeared. Willowbrook remained an island, its bridges of ice and secrecy intact. In the entrance hall, the Christmas tree shed needles onto the parquet, and the mistletoe above the archway looked suddenly forlorn, its berries dulled by coal smoke from the fires. At 11 o'clock precisely, Hercule Poirot sent Briggs through the corridors with a single instruction. Every soul in the house, family, guests, staff, prisoners, was to assemble in the drawing-room in 20 minutes. No exceptions, no excuses. The little Belgian's voice carried the authority of a field marshal. Even the kitchen cat obeyed, slinking in to curl beneath the piano. Poirot himself spent the interval in the library. He stood before the tapestry safe, now open, the true hawthorn wreath resting on its black velvet cushion. Sunlight, thin wintry, struck the central diamond and flung fractured rainbows across the spines of Gibbon and Thackeray. He turned the circlet slowly, noting again the Venetian hallmarks, the minute scratch on the inner band where Sophia de Lauro's thumbnail had slipped during the switch. Every detail was catalogued, every lie accounted for, yet one thread remained loose. He closed the safe, spun the dial, and pocketed the key Briggs had surrendered that morning. Then he took from his waistcoat a small glass vial, stoppered, labelled in his own neat hand, cyanide, mistletoe, 26 Thun. The remaining berries dissolved in distilled water, enough to kill a regiment or to prove a point. At 11:20 he entered the drawing-room. They were all there, arranged like pieces on a chessboard. Lady Evelyn occupied the high-backed chair by the fire, the paste wreath replaced by a simple brooch of jet. Julian and Clarissa flanked her, pale, eyes red-rimmed. Felix Lang lounged against the mantel, cigarette unlit. Poirot had forbidden smoking. Captain Hargreaves sat apart, gaunt and bandaged, a blanket over his knees. Dr. Black hovered with a glass of barley water. Sophia de Lauro, wrists in velvet, cuffs, stood between Briggs and Sergeant Meadows. Defiance in every line of her body. Miss Frost, hollow-cheeked, sat on a straight chair, hands folded as though in prayer. The artists, Crane, Wren, Quill, clustered by the window, whispering. Mrs. Finch dabbed her eyes with a lace handkerchief that had seen better decades. The staff lined the back wall. Cook, Graves the butler. 3 maids, 2 footmen, the boot boy, faces scrubbed, aprons starched, fear in every glance. Poirot took the centre of the rug. The fire crackled. Somewhere a clock ticked with the solemnity of a judge. Mesdames et messieurs, he began, voice silken yet edged, we have endured theft, forgery, embezzlement, and attempted murder. 3 wreaths have circled this house like planets, the true, the false, and the fatal. Today I tie the final knot. He placed the glass vial on the occasional table beside the rosewood box. First, the theft of the true wreath. He gestured to Sophia. Mademoiselle de Loro planned for months. She persuaded Lady Evelyn the original had been switched in 1897, a clever lie supported by forged papers. The exchange was made last week. Mademoiselle departed with the paste copy, believing it real. She returned yesterday, hid in the icehouse tunnel, and switched them again during the confusion of Miss Frost's staged theft. The motor sled was her escape, thwarted by snow and by Hercule Poirot. Sophia's lip curled. You have the jewel. Charge me and be done. Patience, mademoiselle. Justice is not a railway timetable. He turned to Miss Frost. You, mademoiselle, discovered the switch while auditing insurance values. Instead of exposing Lady Evelyn, you saw opportunity. You forged the anonymous letters, scattered holly berries, planted the duplicate key and Julian's mask, creating chaos to cover your sale of the real wreath to a Rotterdam dealer. You placed the paste copy on the Christmas tree, intending to retrieve the true one later, but Sophia outplayed you. Miss Frost's voice was a thread. I only wanted to escape servitude. Servitude ends with honesty, not larceny. Poirot's tone softened a fraction. You will return the embezzled sums. Leniency may follow. He faced Captain Hargreaves. Captain, your attempt at self-poison was noble in intent, misguided in execution. You believed Julian intended murder. You chose death to shield Lady Evelyn from scandal. But the poisoner was... He paused, letting the silence stretch until it snapped. None of you! A collective gasp. Lady Evelyn half rose. Then who? Poirot lifted the vial. The mistletoe was tampered with at 6:50 this morning, while the key cabinet stood open. The conservatory door was locked at 7. Yet the poison appeared on a sprig directly above Lady Evelyn's bench. How? He crossed to the Christmas tree, plucked a fresh sprig of mistletoe, and held it beside the poisoned one. Observe, the berries are identical. Viscum album, common mistletoe. But the poisoned sprig is drier. The leaves curl slightly. It was cut days ago, soaked in cyanide solution, then rehung among the fresh clusters. The substitution required access to the conservatory before Briggs locked it last night. Briggs frowned. I locked at 1:30. No one entered after. Exactly. Therefore the poisoner entered earlier and left the sprig ready, but the target changed. Poirot's gaze swept the room, settling on Mr. Peregrine Quill. Monsieur le Poète, you recited the night before Christmas at the feast, substituting wreath for stockings. Charming. But earlier that evening at 7:15, you were seen by the boot boy leaving the conservatory with green stains on your cuffs. You claimed to be gathering ivy for your buttonhole, yet the ivy is in the kitchen garden. Quill's monocle slipped. I needed inspiration. The glasshouse atmosphere is humid. Mistletoe dries quickly when cut. You prepared the sprig then, intending to kill Julian. Julian recoiled. Me! Poirot nodded. You, monsieur. Quill is not a poet. He is Peregrine Quillercouch, former curator of the Venetian Museo Civico, dismissed for trafficking in Renaissance jewels. Sophia di Lauro is his niece. Together they plan to reclaim the wreath and silence the one person who could expose them. Julian, who met Sophia in London and suspected the switch. You refused her offer, but kept her letters. Dangerous knowledge. Quill's face crumpled. She was never meant to die, just frightened into selling. Lies upon lies. Poirot produced a folded letter from his pocket, Julian's confession from the night before. You wrote to Julian, dispose of the evidence or the wreath will be your shroud. He ignored you, so you poisoned the mistletoe above the bench, knowing Lady Evelyn takes coffee there. A tragedy that would force the sale and implicate Julian when his letters were found. Sophia lunged, Italian curses flying. Briggs restrained her. Poirot continued, relentless, but Lady Evelyn changed her routine. The poison remained unused until Captain Hargreaves, believing Julian the killer, drank it to protect her. A chain of misunderstanding forged by greed. He turned to Lady Evelyn. Madame, the wreath is yours by right, but its history is poison. I suggest you gift it to the nation, displayed in the Ashmolean with the full story. Let truth be its final setting. Lady Evelyn rose, regal despite exhaustion. So be it. Poirot faced the room. The case is closed. Mademoiselle de Lauro and Monsieur Quill will face charges in 2 countries. Miss Frost, restitution and probation. Captain Hargreaves, compassionate leave from his own conscience. The rest of you carry the lesson. Secrets rot faster than holly. He placed the vial in Sergeant Meadows's hand. Dispose of this, and have the mistletoe burned. Of it. As the room emptied, some to pack, some to weep, some to stare into the fire, Lady Evelyn approached Poirot. You leave today. The plough comes at 2. I have a train from Oxford at 4. He smiled, the first genuine one in days. London calls, and a cup of proper chocolate. She pressed the paste wreath into his hands, a keepsake from a grateful family. Poirot bowed over it. Paste or diamond, madame, both are symbols. One of deception, one of endurance. I prefer the endurance. Outside the wind dropped. The snow began to melt in earnest, rivulets running from the eaves like tears long held back. Inside, the drawing-room fire settled into embers. Poirot stood alone beneath the archway, the mistletoe now gone, the air clean. He touched his moustache, satisfied. Order restored, justice served. And somewhere in the distance, church bells rang for a new day. The little grey cells, he reflected, had earned their Christmas rest. Chapter 10. Resolution Under the Stars. The Oxford plough arrived at 2:15, a snorting iron beast that carved a black furrow through the white fields and left the Manor Drive steaming like a battlefield after rain. By 3 o'clock the Rolls-Royce Phantom stood ready at the portico, its chains removed, its bonnet still warm. Briggs loaded Poirot's travelling case with the solemnity of a pallbearer. Inside, wrapped in cotton wool, lay the paste hawthorn wreath, Lady Evelyn's parting gift, now destined for a glass case in Poirot's Baker Street flat, a reminder that even forgeries could tell the truth. The household assembled on the steps to see him off. Lady Evelyn wore sable against the wind, the true wreath locked once more in the library safe, its future secured by a codicil to her will. To the Ashmolean Museum, Oxford, in perpetuity, with the full and unexpurgated history of its adventures. Julian and Clarissa stood side by side, no longer rivals, but conspirators in survival. The family fortune would be rebuilt on honesty and the sale of peripheral estates. Felix Lang had already telephoned his broker in New York. Something about investing in English honesty for a change. Captain Hargreaves leaned on his cane, colour returning to his cheeks. Dr. Black had prescribed rest, sunshine, and the complete works of P.G. Wodehouse. Sophia de Lauro and Peregrine Quill, uncle and niece in crime, sat handcuffed in the back of Sergeant Meadows's reinforced van, bound for separate trials. Miss Frost, pale but composed, had been granted bail on condition of immediate restitution. She would spend the next decade balancing ledgers for a charity in Bournemouth. Poirot descended the steps, coat buttoned to the throat, muffler burgundy, Homburg, at the precise angle that had survived blizzards and bullets alike. He paused on the gravel. "Mesdames et messieurs," he said, voice carrying over the crunch of departing tires, "you have given Hercule Poirot a Christmas to remember. Theft, forgery, poison, attempted suicide, and most dangerous of all, family sentiment. Yet order is restored. The wreath glitters, the truth is polished, and the little grey cells are content." Lady Evelyn stepped forward. "You leave us poorer in mystery, monsieur, but richer in clarity. Willowbrook will never forget." Poirot bowed over her hand. Nor will Hercule Poirot forget the goose, the mulled wine, and the mistletoe that nearly proved fatal. Adieu. He climbed into the Rolls. Briggs closed the door with a soft thud, took the wheel, and eased the car down the drive. In the wing mirror, Poirot watched the manor shrink. Gables, chimneys, the Christmas tree visible through the mullioned window like a green flame. Then the yews swallowed it, and the road opened to the wider world. They reached Oxford Station with 20 minutes to spare. Briggs carried the case to the platform. The London train steamed gently, impatient. Poirot pressed a sovereign into the chauffeur's palm. "For your discretion, mon ami, and for the cocoa that was never poisoned." Briggs's weathered face cracked into a grin. "Safe journey, sir, and Merry Christmas, belated." Poirot boarded, found his compartment, settled into the corner seat. The guard's whistle shrilled, wheels turned, the spires of Oxford slid past like a dream receding. He opened his notebook for the final entry. Willowbrook, 26 foot in conclusion, true wreath, Ashmolean, 1926, paste wreath, Baker Street, souvenir, thieves, 3, Frost, Deloro, Quill, poison, mistletoe, cyanide, 3 berries, motives, greed, legacy, silence, saved by, change of habit, captain's sacrifice, little grey cells, moral, even Christmas cannot escape order. He closed the book, slipped it away, and took from his pocket a small tin of crystallized violets, a gift from Mrs. Finch. The train gathered speed, fields blurring into watercolour. He allowed himself one sweet, then another, savouring the sugar and the silence. At Paddington, the sky had cleared to a hard, perfect blue. George waited with the Daimler, impassive as ever. "Productive journey, sir." Exhausting, George. But the English aristocracy, mon Dieu, they are more dangerous than the Orient Express. George stowed the case. "Home, sir?" "Home and a bath, and chocolate, thick, dark, and unpoisoned." Baker Street welcomed him with gaslight and the faint scent of coal. In the flat, the fire was laid, the evening paper folded to the crossword. Poirot hung his coat, placed the paste wreath on the mantel beside a photograph of a duchess and a bronze bust of Napoleon. He studied it for a long moment. The dull emeralds, the cloudy rubies, the glass diamond that caught the lamplight, and threw it back as honestly as it could. A forgery, yes, but one that had survived fire, flood, and human folly. He poured chocolate from the simmering pot on the spirit lamp, raised the cup in a silent toast. "To Christmas," he murmured. "To wreaths of holly and wreaths of lies, and to the little grey cells which untangle both. Outside, London settled into the quiet of Boxing Night. Inside, Hercule Poirot sipped his chocolate, the fire crackled, and the paste wreath gleamed with a light all its own. The mystery was ended. The holiday, for once, was truly merry.